Dr. Jazz.
Thanks so much for taking the time. I will not waste your time since I know you're busy afterwards. So, but I wanted to ask, I listened to your music for such a long time, and you've been busy despite the COVID situation. Last year also, I saw you did some duo stuff with Jenny Scheinman in Vermont, in Burlington.
Yeah, but that was actually a re-streaming of a concert we had done a couple of years ago.
Ah, I didn't know that. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you about your duo situations anyway. How do you, I think I have you on a couple of duo records, some stuff with Ben Goldberg and with Han Bennink. I love that Han Bennink stuff, the 11 Ghosts. That's like, it's so crazy. But I wanted to ask you, how do you approach a duo situation? And how do you choose the people, or they choose you? Like, how do these duo situations happen? How do you approach them as an improviser?
Well, I guess to answer the second part of your question first, I think the way Ben Goldberg and I have talked about it really is a good way of putting it. We think of it as a dialogue or a conversation. So it's that step between performing solo with either an imaginary ensemble or playing with the space and the audience and so on, the energy of the audience, and playing with an ensemble and, like with a trio or more. And what I love about duo is that there's so much space.
Yeah.
And yet there's always something to respond to or start an idea and then know that someone will pick it up. So it's really a wonderful, wonderful way to play. I love it.
And it's so intimate as well, right? Like you can actually feel the other player really strongly. I love that.
Yeah,
playing duo.
Feel them and hear them really well. And, I think the way they come about differs from in each situation. But I think the thing that's special about it is, or what makes a duo special is when there's some kind of connection, like instant affinity. And I felt that both with Han and with Ben and with Jenny.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, I feel like I've done other Marty Ehrlich.
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
Duo for a long time, so there's certain people that it just clicks with.
Yeah, how was it like with Han? Like, because I listened to those I don't know, songs like Frank Goes or some other stuff, which is just like it's burning. And I've never played with Han, but I've seen him live like 6-7 times, and it's always like you're watching there like, whoa, what's happening now? How was that like for you?
Wow. It was quite an experience. He's like a force of nature, as you know. And I was, when we first connected, that was pretty early in my professional career. And let's say, we could say I was a bit naive. So what I played on a concert of Fred Frith's, a large ensemble. We were doing Fred's photographic scores up at Victoriaville in Quebec, and Han was in the ensemble, and this was my first time meeting him. And at some point in the evening, we had a duo, and I was like, wow, this guy what great energy. I love this. I want to play with him. So I just went up to him. I said, I'd love to play with you again. Maybe there's some situation. And I mentioned it to my agent at the time in Europe. And at that time I was also recording for Hat Art.
Hat Hut, yeah.
Hat Hut, yeah. Yeah. And Han had done some recording for them. And so both the record label and my agent said, oh, I think we could put together a tour and then you could do a recording at the end of it. and it was quite an extensive tour. It was maybe 3 weeks with very little time off.
That's a long
And I mean, it was like a trial by fire or baptism by fire for me, because Han and I did one earlier gig in Vancouver at the Vancouver Jazz Festival, and I remember we both started strong, and he never let up.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is a challenge.
That's a word for
it was really, really amazing. And then, what was so wonderful I learned so much about free improvisation, because even though we had some material, some compositions of mine and some blues pieces, we didn't have any arrangements. We didn't have any plan about when they might fall in a set, or even if we would play them. And he insisted, that every night be fresh. And, sometimes I'd find something that worked really well, and I'd sort of hint at that again, and he would just like, no way that's going to happen. So I learned so much. I had so much fun with him. And then, I've since had several opportunities to play with him. And, now it feels very comfortable and fun. And
sure.
I have a lot better idea about how to approach it. But at the time, it was a real, a great learning experience for me.
Yeah. No, that you mentioned this, like repeating. I also love that, how you learned that. Like I played with Tony a lot with Malaby, and I'm younger than Tony, but like we played like a great free gig. We had a tour, like 14-day tour, and I was like, oh, that's happening. Then the next day I kind of repeated that, like, let's go there. And he just didn't play, and I was like, damn, what am I doing wrong? And then I asked him afterwards, and he said kind of the same. What you like? Well, no. I don't want to do the same thing. I want to go somewhere else. So, but is that how you do it also now? Like, let's say free improvisation. I mean, if we talk about free improvisation, how do you approach a free improv gig, either a solo or a duo? I mean, how do you start with an idea? How do you imagine it? I spoke with Tom Rainey, and I've played with him, and it's amazing. He can just play a snare drum for 3 minutes and it makes sense, and he sticks with it. How do you do that with piano or harmonium?
Well, I think it's like being willing to go with what I'm hearing in the moment, what I'm feeling in the moment, instead of thinking about what to do.
Yeah.
And then, even if, it's pretty hard, we develop certain ways of playing, and we have certain things that, we could say are our song.
Yeah, it's hard to escape
play, but I think it's that willingness to be open and hear something new and try something new.
Yeah. But do you have like an idea, like when you start the pre-improv, that let's say solo or with other players, like I will play something rhythmically now, or I will start with a melody, or you basically just jump in the water? And
it depends, it depends. Sometimes I do, and especially like when I'm just playing on my own, practicing, I'll think about different kinds of spaces that I would like to explore through improvisation. But when I'm playing with other people, I try to be, so when I'm doing a solo concert, I might say, oh, I'd like to try that space to start tonight or something. But when I'm playing with other people, it's, I usually go more with if I'm starting, I just go with an impulse. It's like it's a combination of a physical impulse and a sonic idea.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Yeah, I'm always curious how, like all of you are such great improvisers, and you just basically have always such good ideas. When I listen, I'm like, damn, sometimes you get stuck in these starting to repeat yourself. I sometimes get so sick of my playing that I'm like, damn, I played this, and you try to escape this, and I'm always like trying to find ideas how to do that. So
yeah, I've been going through a period like that during the pandemic. Because this is really the first time in my adult life, since I've been really doing music, that I haven't just kind of gone from one thing to the next for most of the time. And to suddenly have this big open space, I was like, okay, I need to develop some new ideas. I have a sense of what I want to do, but I'm still trying to figure it out, 10 months later.
Yeah.
And I heard something very encouraging. I was listening to, I teach composition and improvisation at the University of California in Berkeley. And our graduate students had invited in a great, digital music producer, composer named Jalen to give an artist talk. And it was so great to hear her say, the best music I've ever done has come out of these long periods of not being able to find it.
Yeah.
And that reminder to persevere and be patient and be open and not give up.
Yeah.
You're going first when you really want, and it does take time. Sometimes it can take, a long time.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know that ever goes away. At least it's never gone away for me.
Yeah, no, it's like, that solo album, Life Carries Me That Way, This Way. Like this is basically what you say. And it was a solo record also. But
yeah,
I wanted to ask you about you mentioned solo playing also before. How is it for you to play a solo? And I think I've read somewhere that you also like do some like graphics course, or like you have for solo playing. And solo piano tradition, it's incredible heritage, and it's also guitar, but like if you're speaking like about, I don't know, solo trombone, it's not as big as piano or something. But when was the moment right that you decided to make a solo piano record when you did it? And how do you approach solo playing?
Well, for that project, I realized I was playing, I don't play as many solo concerts as I do with ensembles, but I realized that I play enough of them and that I really wanted to, create a body of work or a set of music that was just for solo. And so I I took these drawings actually by a friend of mine named Don Reich, a visual artist. And I kind of lived with them for a long time and, thought about, improvised with them, wrote about them, thought about various ways I might respond to them. Which was really another kind of dialogue for me. So it's it's a way of creating a dialogue that I don't have with another person, or with another musician, I should say. Yeah. But and then I also thought about what are all the ways that I like to play the piano? Like, what's my language as an improviser? And trying to synthesize those two ideas, like bringing my language in response to his drawings, but also letting his drawings suggest some new ideas, new language I might use. But I really wanted to celebrate the piano, and how I like to play the piano.
Yeah.
That was kind of the idea behind that.
You still have the joy when you sit behind the piano, that it's like when you play something that it's like so big?
I can't say I have it all the time, but I still experience it, and that's really that's the thing that keeps me going. That's the prime motivation. So I'm glad it's still there. I went through a few months during the pandemic of not feeling it so much.
Yeah.
And, just the last few months I've been really digging in and feeling it again. And it's great.
Yeah, it's funny. We have that all the time, right? All of us. It's like, I'm the same. I'm sometimes like, I'm creative peaks, and then it's just like, it sucks. But like this joy for piano, like I just wanted to ask you now catch you with this. And when was the first time you heard, like, for jazz improvisation? You teach this now as well. And what was the trigger to start improvising? You know, which records were these, or piano players? Do you remember?
Well, the interesting thing is that I mean, I think a lot of us do this probably, but I really started improvising before I ever took piano lessons.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I realized when I started, I took jazz piano on a whim. I was in college and I was studying environmental science, and I was
Oh
decided to
wow.
stay. This was in Washington State, a long way away from where my parents lived in Chicago, and I decided to spend the summer out there. And there were no science classes I needed to take, and I knew I wanted to get back to playing the piano. I had given it up for a while in high school. And I saw this sign up in a restaurant in the town, Olympia, Washington, for jazz piano lessons. And, you know, my first piano teacher, Erwin Helfer in Chicago, was a blues and boogie woogie player and
Oh wow.
improviser and played jazz as well. Although at the time, he was mainly playing blues. And, so I had some inkling of what improvisation was about, but I hadn't really listened to any jazz artists yet. And so it was like I was learning to play the music as I was being introduced to it.
Hmm.
You know, and I think the earliest records were Bud Powell, as in terms of pianists, Bud
Yeah.
Powell with Charlie Parker, and McCoy
Yeah.
Tyner with John Coltrane. And, you know, it branched out from there. I was introduced to Elmo Hope quite
Oh
early,
yeah.
and then Herbie Nichols, and
Oh
then
yeah. I
Monk.
love Herbie.
And then I started to, I think Monk was one of the more pivotal players for me, because although, you know, he was associated with the bebop cohort, you know, he was really doing something very original and
Yeah.
very obviously very much his own. And that was kind of one of the first inklings I had that, well, yeah, I love jazz and I want to pursue jazz, but I think I need to find my own way, you know,
Hmm.
my own language and my own way of putting it together. And if I could continue just with another story from that period, I went to hear Leroy Jenkins play a concert
Oh wow.
in trio with Amina Claudine Myers and Ferron Akloff,
Oh
uh,
wow.
right in that same period, in the first few months that I was studying jazz. And I had no idea
Wow.
what they were doing. I had no context or reference for the music they were playing, but the energy and the sounds, everything was so new. And I just was like, this light bulb went off over my head. And I was like, that's what I want to do with my life. I'm going to figure out how I want to play the piano, what my language is. And, you know, and then I continued to study the jazz tradition and all
Hmm.
kinds of other music. And I'm influenced and inspired by so many people and
Right.
types of music. But I think that gave me somehow this idea that no matter how much I might love another musician's playing and want to be able to do what they do, in the end, it's only if it serves whatever my own
Yeah.
vision or
Yeah.
my own music is.
Did you tell Leroy that when you guys did that equal interest thing, like the story?
Yeah, I'm sure I told him.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool that you got to play with him then. I mean, with Joseph also, and that's
Yeah, with the two of them, it was real. That was a very special ensemble and
how
experience.
did that ensemble happen, by the way? I mean, like, I love the trio.
Yeah, well, let's see. I think what happened was, first of all, when I moved to New York, you know, when I was in college and met Leroy, he gave me his phone number and he said,
Ah,
"When you come to New York, give me a call."
oh wow.
And the other, you know, Braxton had also come through and said something similar like, you know, if you're serious about this music, you have to spend some time in New York, which he referred to as the meat grinder.
Oh shit, yeah.
I was pretty sure once I left college that I would get to New York at some point. And when I did, I called Leroy, and he was teaching a workshop. And I joined that workshop right away and started connecting with musicians. But Leroy and I became quite good friends. I gave his daughter piano lessons for many years.
Oh, wow.
He would hire me even very early on to do workshops of music he was developing and
Wow.
rehearsals and things like that. And then I started studying at some point. Several years later, I started studying Aikido at Joseph Jarman's dojo in Brooklyn.
Really? Wow, how cool.
And we met through the Musicians of Brooklyn Initiative, which was this organization that Oliver Lake and
Oh, yeah.
Lester Bowie, and I think Cecil was also part of it, but I never saw him at the meetings. And I met Joseph because we were both having pieces of ours played on the same concert.
Mhm.
And so he invited me to his dojo, and I started doing that. Anyway, so I had this connection with them for several years. And then at some point, they were doing a concert with the SEM ensemble. The AACM was doing one of their concerts with SEM and a chamber music ensemble. And I was invited to be a guest soloist with them because they were playing, Leroy and Joseph's music. Yeah. And for the opening set, Muhal asked Joseph and Leroy to put together an ensemble to do an open improv. And they invited me to do that. And then after that, we did that. And after that concert, we were somehow backstage, and Muhal said, you guys, you should start a trio. And yeah, and we said, oh, that sounds like a fun idea. Like, what would we call it? And Muhal said, Equal Interest.
So, wow. He hooked you up together then. That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love these stories that you kind of get to play with people, that were so important in the beginning. That's so amazing then. But you mentioned New York, and you came to New York in the 80s, right? Like mid 80s.
Yeah, around 84.
So how was that like for you? Like, for a young female jazz player coming to New York, like, how did you experience that?
Well, it was a lot of different things, but it was super exciting and very clearly like the right move for me. I was pretty naive, and I had thought maybe after college that I would go to graduate school before going to New York. And I was interested in, at the time it was called the Third Stream program at New England Conservatory. It's now Contemporary Improvisation or something. And so I moved to Boston and took some ear training lessons with Rand Blake and applied to their graduate program, a master's program, and I got accepted. And somehow that gave me the confidence to move to New York. And I moved to New York and decided then not to go to grad school. Yeah. But I studied privately with a bunch of people and just slowly started to find my community. And I was very fortunate. I had great teachers. I studied with Jackie Byard.
Yeah. How was that? Like, I saw that in Don Poland also, right?
And Don Poland.
Wow.
Both of them were super encouraging, and, learned a lot from them. And also studied composition with Henry Threadgill.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Like, I mean, Henry's for me, like, I've spoken with Liberty Ellman about, Liberty has played with Henry for such a long time. And basically, I checked out the records I have of you, and like, you seem to pick out also players who played with Henry a lot, like B. Brett and all the previous kind of groups, But how was it like to study with him? I mean, like, when I listen to your compositions, you're really original composition-wise, but there are like some snippets every now and then you hear, like these cells ideas that he has, the intervals, and like, how was it to study with him?
It was great. It was, he's really the only, I've taken composition lessons a little bit with other people, but Henry was really the main Henry's approach became central to my own process of composing. And, so I still use, to this day, I still use many of the ideas and techniques that I learned from him. And I think, which does include, at that point, his interval approach was at a different place than it is today. But even then, he was thinking a lot about intervals and creating a kind of organic space by using intervals, but not necessarily placing them in the same kind of tonal or harmonic context that we think of in Western music. And so because that was an influence on me, and I love Henry's music, it made sense to reach out to musicians who had played with him, because they could also bring that sensibility to the music that I was writing. But I actually got to know Stomu before he ever worked with Henry.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Stomu and I met quite early on I think he had just done his first gig with Henry, perhaps. If we were playing at a festival in Verona. And I heard Stomu with, I'm pretty sure it might have been a large ensemble of Henry's, like the Society Situation Dance Band or something. And I met him and we really clicked. And so I was putting a new trio together in around 97 or 98. And I invited Stomu and Kenny Wallison.
Wow.
And so Stomu and I have been playing together. He's been my main bass player now since 97.
That's quite amazing, right?
Over 20 years.
Yeah. Did you ever play like with Henry also?
I played on a couple of Henry's projects. I was on a couple of the records, and then we did some concerts. One was called Song Out of My Trees.
Exactly.
And then the other one was
with Brandon Ross also, right? I think What was it with Brandon?
Yes, it was. I think it was a guitar quartet. So Jerome Harris and Brandon, and I can't remember exactly who else was on that right now. It'll come back to me. And then we did a reprise of that on a later album. I think it might have been the first Make a Move before it was actually a band.
Yeah.
And we did another piece for piano and guitar quartet.
Yeah, he's such a he's amazing. I remember like I didn't have any sheet music or whatever he has, and just trying to figure out what he does, and then I was listening like to all these lines, writing out and like figuring out. I was like, damn. Then I read interviews, but I guess you have to talk to people, and so that they explain to you like Liberty and everyone like what's happening. Actually, I was like, oh damn, okay, that's it. But it's so cool you got to do that with him. But did these guys like Don and Henry, and did they also like inspire you and encourage you to become a band leader? Because like those early trio records with Jump and Now like,
I don't remember that. I think that just kind of happened because I mean, the only person I really had a long side person gig with was Butch Morris. I started working with Butch, maybe in '86. It was probably the first gig I had outside of, solo or duo kinds of things. And so, besides doing that, I didn't, for some reason, side person gigs weren't in my, field of opportunity. And so I did, what seemed obvious, which was to just put my own band together.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be the right way to go.
Definitely. How did you feel like it when because being a band leader, it's a special thing, I guess. How did you feel like when you kind of put your own group together under your name and like lead the guys and how are you now as a band leader after basically 30 years. Yeah, like after leading groups.
Again, I have to say I was pretty naive. Like I had done some gigs in college in Olympia where I put together bands with local musicians and we played my music. I mean, that was what I did for my like college recitals and concerts. But I didn't have an ongoing band at that time. So I'd never been a band leader. And what really happened was, again, it was just, kind of serendipity because I played a concert. I did a duo concert with a friend of mine named Marion Brandis at the time, a flute player. And we were invited to play at the Knitting Factory, maybe in the second year of its existence or something, quite early on. And we did several duo pieces, and then we each played a solo. And I played a solo piece that I had written called Some Kind of Blues. Mm-hmm. And Michael Dorf asked if he could put it on one of those Knitting Factory, live from the Knitting Factory volumes. And so that happened, and then he followed up with, well, we're putting together a tour of Europe, a Knitting Factory tour of Europe, and we'd like to invite you, but maybe inviting people who had been on the compilation records, and but maybe solo isn't the way to go. What do you think about putting together a trio?
Oh, wow.
So that's how that happened, and I invited Lindsey and Reggie, Lindsey Horner, Reggie Nicholson. And I had heard them play with Muhal and thought, they were a great rhythm section. So that's how that happened. And then I kind of basically had to figure out how to turn my solo pieces into trio pieces and learn how to go from being a soloist to playing in a trio, to really playing in a band, because aside from a few things in college, I had very little experience with it. So the whole process was just like being in school for me. I was just learning. Sometimes it was the school of hard knocks, but I was learning all the time.
Yeah. You like being a band leader? Like, I mean, obviously you do because you've done like so much work, but like now if you like can, kind of flow out of your body, see as an observer of watching yourself as a band leader, like how do you approach the situation? Like when you, I don't know, choose a band together, put your compositions, are you like very liberating or like very like strict as a?
That's a good question. Okay, so I went through a series of bands, as you know, and was looking for new voices and new ways of writing for people. And then also, just being in a community with people and that just led me to meet a lot of new people and work with a lot of new people and to really, listen to people and think, who do I feel like would really add something to this music that I'm working on now. So I think I've learned a lot about being a leader and about, how much I want to restrict, as you say, and how much freedom. And I'm finding that, as I get older and the more I do it, like with Snowy Egret, I come in with ideas about arranging and, how we might explore what I might like to ask someone to improvise on or, but I've learned that the best music now happens when I'm willing to let all of that go and really let the guys suggest how we might get into a new piece. And if somebody else hears a place where they really want to take a solo, they go for it. And or we have collective spaces where we might have originally had a solo and accompaniment. And that's super exciting for me, that, to get to a point where the arrangements are just as improvised as and that's that's, I really think a lot about musical personality now and how to choose people and then how to write for them.
Yeah, that I kind of wanted to ask you that anyway, like, because I got this idea, Snowy Egret is like, definitely for me, I don't know. I just love all the players on that band, and and it's also this line that you also have this composed and improvised. It's so blurred in a way, and yeah, that was one question. Basically, you answered it. Like, how do you guys, the compositions are sometimes really long, and how do you envision like a really long composition? I'm always really curious about that. Like, do you write it down on a sketch, like where you want to go, or also what's your compositional process? I mean, you obviously write for the players, right? I mean, knowing who's in the band, but what's your process like when writing? Like, do you have like daily ideas or?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Never the same, but I do have a tendency to sometimes think in a long form. Like I started writing kind of episodic compositions back in the 90s. I did some for Same River Twice.
Yeah.
Even that first record when I expanded the trio to include Dave Douglas and Marty Ehrlich, the extended ensemble, I had a piece called La Mezquita Suite. So I was starting to think in these longer forms and thinking about what kinds of spaces, sonic environments I might like to move through, because I think one of the things I was interested in was departing from the kind of convention of, you play the tune and then everybody takes a solo and then, so I was trying to think about how within one tune there could be a lot of different people could solo in different contexts.
Yeah.
And, certainly something that I learned a lot about from Mingus, things like meditations on integration and stuff like that. But, so sometimes, like I wrote a piece just a couple of years ago as a tribute to Muhal, Richard Abrams, called To Fit Our Real Better, which I haven't recorded yet. And, but it was for the Chicago Jazz Festival, and I was invited to play with an AACM ensemble in Chicago. And I really envisioned, I thought a lot about Muhal's music and the kinds of things that he did, and then kind of found my own way of doing those and putting them all together. And the piece was supposed to be 20 minutes or so. So it had to be some sort of episode, journey. And so I thought about, well, I kind of saw the whole form before I actually found the music that went with the form. So that's how it happens sometimes. Other times it'll start with just a single, short gesture or phrase.
Yeah.
And that I, create lots of variations of, and then see how to put them together and let the form grow out of that.
Yeah, like that dried print on cardboard I listened to yesterday. Yeah. It's like that probably started like with that rhythmical idea, right? Or
well, it was interesting because it actually started with the melody, but the melody was very compressed. It was like almost like a very short bop tune.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't. That's not quite right. It's not quite right. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I could recontextualize it, like put this other kind of rhythmic feel to it. And then, so I did that. I came up with that figure that Stomu and I play with, various variations. And then I actually did this. I don't do this very often, but I put it in my notation program, and I put that bass line in, and just verbatim as the first, 4 bars or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I copied and pasted the other thing on top of it. And then I started moving those copies around and created a lot of space between them. And then I went back and, tweaked the pitch material. So where a new harmony was suggested, I reflected that in the bass, or I changed some of the pitches in the melody. But that's how, and I don't think I've done that very often, but it really worked with that piece.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but are you one of those people like who gets ideas as a composer, like on a daily routine that, you have like a scrapbook where you write things in, or it's just like when, decide, okay, we're going to make a new album now, and now I have 2 months time. We booked the studio in April. I have to write 7 compositions.
Yeah, I think I'm more the former. Like I mean, my studio is kind of a mess at the moment. There's scraps of ideas everywhere.
Oh, that's cool.
And then, I visit them from time to time and see if they are talking to me. Like if they kind of tell me, oh yeah, let's do this with this material. Let's try approaching it this way. And then sometimes I don't get anything and I put it away for a while, and but sometimes I'm successful in coming up with new music for a date. Yeah. But I do best when I have time to let things develop kind of on their own. So even if I have a date coming up, then I go back to those things and I see, okay, what's the furthest along here? How can I? Yeah.
Do you like revisit compositions in a sense that you write it and then when the band plays it, you would completely like tear it apart or change it, or?
Sometimes, especially things that I do with a lot of, some of my pieces work well with lots of different bands and some only work with the band I wrote it for. But for instance, I put together a new quintet, I guess in June of 2019 to do one of those weeks at the Stone. And I thought, I'll just get a great group of improvisers and we'll play free, because I was doing compositions the other nights and with different bands. And then as we were getting closer to the time, I thought, well, maybe it'd be nice to have kind of a roadmap. Like maybe I'll just have I'll go through my sketches and I'll pick a few of those things that aren't developed yet. And those could just be these landing points where we all come together. And so I did that. The band is now become a band. At the time, I invited Mary Halverson, Ingrid Laubrock, Tamika Reed, and Susie Ibarra.
Oh, wow. All ladies.
I brought in this sketch that was several pages long and, with like different sections. And then I just said, okay, let's have you guys do a duo here in between those, or, also had a lot of like verbal instructions about improvs that we could do. And it went really well. And and the idea was inspired by a series of drawings by Cy Twombly. Do you know Cy Twombly, an American abstract artist who spent most of his life working in Italy?
Check him out, okay.
He, so he got started in the 50s and worked all the way up. I mean, he was a young man in the late 50s and worked all the way up until he died in 2011. And I've become sort of obsessed with his work. Yeah. And it's been a big inspiration for several other things I've worked on. In fact, I'm doing a really big project on his work next year.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, so this was inspired by these drawings called For the Love of Fire and Water. So anyway, that was one of those gigs where there was interest to record it afterwards, and we're going to make a record. We were supposed to record in June of last year, but that didn't happen. And we were supposed to go on tour this April, and that's not happening. But eventually, we'll go on tour. And so now during the pandemic, I'm thinking, well, that worked really well for that concert to have it be very loose and open. And I don't want to lose some of that because I like this idea of having a band that can play, completely free, but in a different way than Snowy Egret, but also have some, focus and material to break up the improvisations. Yeah. And now I'm in the process of revising all of that material since we're not going to record it for another few months.
Yeah. Well,
and that's been really fun because, now I'm actually developing some of the compositions, but I make sure that I still leave a lot of open space. And I'm thinking now of actually using some of the drawings as kind of graphic scores for some of the more open improvs.
Yeah, oh, beautiful. Yeah, you seem to be like really into improv lately. I also listened to that with Joël Leandre, Map of Liberation. Also, and is it Nicole? No, it's
Yeah,
Nicole
Nicole.
Mitchell. Yeah,
Yeah.
like how did you guys get together? Like also, like by the way, I mean,
Well,
such a
let's see.
nice band.
Yeah, I met Nicole. Well, let's see. I met Joelle even earlier, I think. When I came out to Berkeley, when I moved to Berkeley from New York, Joelle was a guest, a visiting artist at Mills College, which is
Oh,
in Oakland.
really? Wow.
And somehow, we found ourselves at kind of a house party, and we played a duet, and it was really fun. I loved playing with her. And so when she came back the next year, we organized a concert for the two of us, plus Mark Dresser came up from UC San Diego, and David Wessel, who was a great improviser on electronics, and worked at UC Berkeley. He sadly passed away a few years ago. But the four of us did a gig. And again, I had a nice connection with Joelle. And so we talked and we said, maybe we'll do something. Be great to do something at some point. Well, it wasn't until that was like 2005.
Oh, wow.
And then I met Nicole maybe a year or two after that. The Jazz Institute of Chicago commissioned her to write a piece. And she invited me to be a guest pianist with her ensemble, and it was a tribute to Alice Coltrane.
Oh.
So I went to Chicago and met Nicole and played with her ensemble, and we had a nice connection. And I went on to do several more gigs with Nicole after that. And so now fast forward to 2015, I was doing a residency at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco. And one of the things we were doing was putting together a jazz and improvised music festival. And I got to help curate that. And so I thought about, and I was going to play one of the concerts. And I thought, well, what would I like to do that I've never done? And I thought, I had been listening to their duo, Nicole and Joelle have a duo, and I was listening to one of their records on Rogart, and I thought, I'd love to play with the two of them. Maybe this would be a fun trio.
Oh, wow.
And it was one of those other, another one of those like just happy, outcomes that we had a great gig and decided to put a band together.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Just not to take too much of your time, Myra, just like one more question. It's like you have so many these kind of now co-led bands and bands as a leader, but being a collaborator or a side woman, do you still love doing also that? I mean, I think you play still with Alison Miller, right? Or
oh yeah, that's the only other really major side person gig I've ever had. Sort of ongoing.
Oh yeah.
I played with Jenny for a while too, Jenny Scheinman, but Alison's gig has been like something that's gone on now since 2008, I think.
Well, that Boom Tick Boom was the first one, right?
Yeah.
How did you guys meet actually? And
Alison?
Yeah.
See, how did Alice? Oh, I know. Marty Ehrlich was doing 2 or 3 nights at the Jazz Standard. I think this was in the spring of 2004.
Wow.
And he, at the time, one of his bands was a trio with Allison and Erik Friedlander. And Marty invited me to do our duo on the same night. So, we each played a set, and then he had me sit in with them.
Yeah.
And Allison and I had a great connection.
Yeah.
Never met her before. I'd been hearing about her, but hadn't heard her and hadn't met her. And then she got a gig, I think in 2008 out in Berkeley, because at that point I was just about to move to Berkeley in the second half of 2004. And she had a gig at the Jazz School, this little venue, which is now a really great conservatory program for jazz, and in Berkeley. And she invited me and Todd Sikafus, who was also out here, to do a trio with her. And, that was another thing that just worked really well. And that was the first Boom Tick Boom gig, really. And then it expanded to a quartet with Benny and then Kirk and then Ben. And yeah.
And how is it for you, like a band leader, to be in such a situation where you just kind of have to, how do you approach these situations?
Well, it's really fun for me because, Allison is writing great music.
Yeah.
And I feel like she really gives me a nice place to play, like where I can really be myself in her music.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. And it's a really fun group of people and the music is fun. And it's great not to be responsible for everyone,
That's cool, right? Yeah.
And worry about the money and all that stuff.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. But I could say one more thing about playing these collective bands.
Yeah.
That's another really great compliment to being a leader and writing music. It's so much fun to just get together with people that you love to play with and love to hang out with and have this very open space to play.
Yeah.
I've really been enjoying that, both in the trio with Nicole and Joelle, and in another band I'm in called MZM with Mia Masaoka and Zena Parkins. We have a trio as well. That's very similar, very different music, but similar approach.
It's also nice if these bands are co-led because the burden is a little bit less. I mean,
exactly.
Being a band leader, it's like really.
Yeah.
I mean, now I guess when you're younger, it's even harder because you have to take care of more or less everything. Now you have agents and, booking tour agents kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, I guess it was quite hard, right?
Yeah.
Like first European tours.
Yeah. I've been fortunate. I've had some help quite a bit of the time, at least in Europe.
Okay.
I've been lucky with that. But still, ultimately it's on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right, these collective things. And, another great example of that for me is Trio M with Mark Dressler and Nicholson.
Yeah.
That's a little different in that we play each other's compositions.
Are you guys still active? I mean,
well, we a little bit. Yeah. We played a gig for the first time in a couple of years. We played in November.
Oh, wow.
Here in Oakland. And we had a great time. And we're doing a tour in Europe next November,
I have to check you guys out. I hope you will be near us here. That would be beautiful.
Yeah, that'd be great if we could get to Slovenia.
Yeah, or Austria at least. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Dr. Jazz.